When you want to create a variation of an existing assembly, you can use the copy command to speed up the process. You can choose which components in the assembly are reused and which components are saved as new files. The workflow for copy is similar to mirror, except copy doesn't change the new components. Here I have a door handle assembly, and I need a version with a polished brass coating instead of brushed steel. The internal latch components are the same, but I'll need new files for all of the visible parts. You could open each file, save a copy, change the color style, and then replace the component in the assembly, but that's a lot of work. By using copy, all of the new files are created and you just have to edit them and change the color. Component selection is active when copy starts, and you can select the components in the browser or the graphics window. If you want to remove a component, press the Control key and select it again. In this case, I want all of the components in the assembly, so I'll click the assembly at the top of the browser. The next step is to define whether I want copy to create new components or reuse the existing ones. There are 3 status buttons. The blue button with the double plus signs creates a copy of the component. The yellow button with the plus sign reuses the component. The gray button with the slash excludes the component. You use exclude on components that won't be used in the new assembly. Most components are set by default to create a copy, but standard parts like fasteners are set to reuse. I want to replace the visible components, so I'll leave the handles and covers set to copy. I'll click the icon for the square key to change it to reuse. I need a new faceplate for the latch assembly, which means I also need a new assembly, but I want to reuse the rest of the parts. I have a couple of options to change the status for the components. I can press the Shift key, select the latch and the lock mechanism parts, and then click the Reuse button. I can also click the latch assembly icon to set all of the parts to reuse, and then click the faceplate icon. You can see the faceplate changes to exclude, and the latch assembly icon changes to show that some of the components are reused and some are excluded. I'll click the faceplate icon again to change it and the latch assembly to copy. The next button changes the dialog so you can specify the file names. The file naming window has a table that lists the new components, shows the new names, where they will be saved, and the status. There are 3 options to modify the file name. The default is to add the _copy suffix. You can also add a prefix or increment the file name. I'll select prefix, clear suffix, and then click Apply. This actually does 2 things. It adds new to the file name and removes the _copy suffix, and it updates the default setting. I always rename the files, and I like to use the _copy suffix. I use descriptive file names, and the format is the type of part and then the modifier. In this case, the current files have the brushed steel modifier, and I want to change it to polished brass. It's easier to make that change when the suffix is added. I'll click Revert to remove the last change, and I'll change the settings for the prefix and the suffix. I want this to be the default, so I'll click Apply again. Note that the door handle assembly fields are grayed out. There are 2 options for creating the copies. If Insert in Assembly is selected, the new components are placed on the current assembly, so you don't need a door handle assembly file. When I select Open in New Window, the fields become active because this option creates a new assembly for the components. Next, let's take a look at the file name behavior. I'll double-click in the Handle File Name field, delete _CPY, and press Enter. Note the status changes from the new file to reuse existing because it has the same name as the original. You can't have 2 files with the same name in the same location. Since the handle is a part, you can use this to change the file status without going back to the selection page. Next, I'll edit the door handle assembly and remove the _CPY suffix. This time, the status changes to name conflict. Since the assembly has new child components, you either need to give it a unique file name or change the location. I'll edit it again and change the modifier to polished brass. I want to make the same change to the rest of the components. I can speed up the process by copying the polished brass modifier and replacing the brushed steel string in the other file names. I also want to change file location for these components. The current brushed steel parts are in a brushed steel folder. I want to save the new components in a polished brass folder. When I right-click in the File Location field, you can see there are three options. Source path is the same location as the original file. Workspace uses the top-level folder set by the project file. User path lets you browse for the file location. I'll select User path and click in the field. And then I'll change the folder name from brushed steel to polished brass. Once I've changed the file locations for the other components, I'll click OK. The new assembly is opened so I can make changes. I just have to edit each part and change the color to metal brass.